The reason why the Grand Canyon is so grand is because the rivers that edged it out, they didn't go wide and shallow, they went narrow and deep.
And I know this is going to piss people off when they hear me say it, but they approach this in a really half-assed way, and then they ask themselves why they haven't cracked a certain revenue milestone that they're expecting to crack. You're not free of distractions, and how can you do your best work when you're constantly being pulled in 7 different directions?
Can you guarantee the primary outcome that your clients want? One of the best ways to do it is to find someone that's already climbed Mount Everest and they come back down to base camp and take you up with them.
Number 1, be open to learning. Number 2, be open to being wrong, so you can course adjust. But number 3, understand that there's a delayed gratification effect that's
100%.
going to kick in when you're learning. You're not going to get everything you need to get immediately, because if you did, we'd all be doing it. Welcome back to the First 5 podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to make your first 5 million as fast as possible, possibly in under 2 years or 18 months. Now, before I get into my guest today, let me remind you, b2bschool.co/school. It's a bit abstract, SKOOLY. That's where we've got our community. That's where we've got our frameworks, the things we will talk about today. That's where you're going to find them. You'll find them in that community. There's tons of coursework and coaching available there, and it is 100% free for now. So b2bschool.co/SKOOL. Don't forget to go there. But of course, that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here with Dan. Dan is the CEO's CEO, and I want you to talk to everyone about why you're the CEO, Dan.
Why? Geez, a long story. It's 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears, John. It's taken me a while to. I guess the last 5 years working with the top of the tree. Obviously, starting with small to medium-sized business owners, executives, since 2001 when I first started this, and Over time, as you get better and you begin to produce results for SMEs, every now and then, I used to bump someone who used to run $100 million, $200 million business, and then got invited to a meeting with a couple, turned one into a client, and as a result, obviously, we keep moving upwards in life and keep getting better. So, almost exclusively these days, I work with clients, who are running 50 million plus revenue companies, 50, 100 staff upwards. Every now and then I'll do a smaller project if I like the individual, and we connect. But it's been a while to get there, and as you know, positioning your business is very important. You can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
And based on the value that you bring to the table, eventually you sort of find your niche and
find your way.
What you're good at.
Which is not jingle writing, which is what it was when I met you.
Well, I remember, that was
over 15 years ago.
That was 15 years ago.
It was over 15 years ago.
It was 2010.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be a jingle writer, everyone. I thought I've got this great musical talent. I'm going to live like Charlie Sheen. I'm going to be a jingle writer, and my life is going to be really, really easy. And then I met Dan, and he said, "Son, how many jingles do you need to write to make $100,000?" And it was at that point I realised that maybe it was going to be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you knocked on my door. It was a wet Saturday morning. I remember you came and knocked on my door. You were the first guy actually in my foundation, which is still running today, mentoring young business startups. And you were the very first guy.
Yeah.
And remember, you knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. It was raining, and obviously we met through one of your dad's common friends. And I asked you that question, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And you said, I'm going to be writing jingles. And I slammed the door in your face. And I asked you to come back. Before I slammed the door, I asked you to come back. Was it a week later?
Yeah, something like that. This is a true story, by the way. It's a true story.
And I think you came back a week later. How long did we work for? A couple of years? You were part of my foundation.
Easy. At least probably the first 4 to 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey, I was working with Dan.
And now you're interviewing me.
And now I'm interviewing you.
The tables have turned.
Haven't they? Now you're the CEO.
I've created a monster, Frankenstein.
Hopefully all the best parts.
It happens a lot. Happens a lot with
the
the young guys that I mentor. I had a chat the other day with one of the gentlemen on the board of directors for my foundation, and he said, "Hey Dan, don't you think it's time we added some young ladies in the group? I mentored some young women." I said, "You know what? I think it's time." So So
There you go.
That'll be changing for the better.
Yeah, very, very good. So what
Yeah.
Dan was just talking about there was his Adelphia Foundation, which I was a proud member of. Lucky to be able to come back and help some of his people as well. But you know, he's just trying to help young people like I was develop a business, find their niche, focus on their craft, develop a business. But today I want to come back to the topic because you're very well experienced in this, because you've seen a lot of stuff and you've worked with a lot of businesses. We want to talk about how to get your first 5 million in revenue, and ideally as fast as possible, because what we know is most businesses fail at the 5-year point.
Yep.
Revenue is obviously a common contributor to that. So what Dan's going to talk about is really making that first 5 million as easily as possible. Yep. So, I mean, kick things off for us, Dan. Give us some advice. What do you think?
Well, I mean, one thing I picked up early on was that money, revenue, cash flow, profit, whichever way you want to slice and dice it, right? It's just a simple direct correlation to the amount of value one brings to the table.
Yeah.
So how much value you bring to the table, and how many people you can serve.
Yeah.
You know, the more people you can serve, the more value you bring to the table, the more you can invoice, right? The higher the the cost per unit or the cost per service or whatever. So I think, starting at the bare bones, when I first started, my first client in 2001, when I had a school before that, that I started at the age of 17, for I did my nuclear physics chemistry degree at university, and I coached maths, chemistry, physics. So I sold that in 2000, took a year off, and then started this stuff. And my very first client was a very simple client, and my first sign-on agreement was for $18,000 a year, which is $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
You know, and when they signed on, I thought, I've made it, I've arrived, I can now consult,
Yeah.
And obviously, through the last 24 years, the key to getting up towards 5 million a year or a year and a half, 5 million Aussie dollars, which is about, 3 million US?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Exchange rate's about 60 cents to the dollar.
Yeah, it's probably like 3.2, 3.3.
Yeah, I was trading it this morning. The difference has been not the passing of the 24 years. The difference has been the self-education, and through that, the value that I can bring to the table to business owners, CEOs these days. And, for them to sign on for, 150, 200,000 US dollars a year, if they're running a $100 million business or a $50 million business, if you've got a track record, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So I think starting off, on this podcast today, I think the key is just to become perpetually better day by day. And there's 1,001 ways that you could do it. I think one of the quickest ways you can do it, and hence similar to this podcast today, is try to pass something on to your guests.
Yeah.
I think the quickest way you can do it is to immerse yourself with someone who's already been there.
Yeah.
Because we're in the same sort of game, right? You do sort of more digital sales marketing stuff, which I do part of that. So people ask me, what do you do for a living? And, okay, I work with CEOs. Okay, it sounds a bit, But at the end of the day, what do both you and I and the consultants out there really do for a living? What is a real benefit of what you give to the people you work with, whether it be your clients, my clients? And I thought about this long and hard, and at the end of the day, I basically compress time, which is by far is the most valuable asset.
Yeah.
When you get to 60, 70, I'm close to 60, you're sort of thinking more about time than how much more money you can make.
Yeah.
So time becomes sort of, supersedes and takes the place of, all the materialistic stuff.
Yeah.
So when you add value to people's lives, especially people in the business world, deep down you're actually saving them time, because you're passing information on to them that they can then execute on. They're making more profits. They're less stressed. They've got more free time. Obviously, money goes up. They can actually take part of that money in salaries and pay themselves and their team, have a better life for their family. So deep down, I think the fundamental benefit that we as business advisors bring to the world is that we save years and decades of time for our clients if you do it right.
Yeah.
I was in a board meeting this morning with a Chinese client here in the city, and we had a 3-hour meeting. It's supposed to be half an hour sort of meet and greet. He's about to become a client next week. I'm going to give him a proposal next week. He'll come on board. But a half an hour meeting went into a 3-hour meeting, right? And I always allow that during my sales process because, he opens up and you find out things about him, and then deep down what you find out is all these guys are pressed for time.
Yeah.
They've got so much going on, and they just really bring us on board, bring me on board, just to declutter, increase profits, revenue in less time, so they can go on and do more things.
Yeah.
And as you know, time is, like I said before, it's by far the most valuable asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has to be.
Absolutely. So what you're telling me, and I think this makes total sense for me at least, is that you want to scale to 5 million as fast as possible. Part of this is about working out what you really do and what value you actually really bring to the table. Because if you can be clear on that, then it's extremely hard for someone not to want to invest their money in you, right? And I think that, I see this when I'm coaching my own clients. Whenever they come to me and they say, I can't close a deal, or it's taking too long to close a deal, they can't shorten the cycle, it's getting too expensive to close deals, it often has to do with the fact that their clients don't really understand, or their prospects don't really understand the outcomes that they're actually going to deliver. So how can you speed up the process when it comes to sales when people don't get it?
Great question. I'll just use a perfect example. So when I had my school from the age of 17, 1984 to the year 2000 when I sold it, so I had an after-school coaching service for maths, chemistry and physics for students who were, HSC students going into university, going into college, right? And it's highly competitive, as you know, here in Australia and Sydney, right? And so these 16, 17, 18-year-old students would go to school during the daytime, Monday to Friday, then come to me in the evenings or on weekends.
Yeah.
Right? I was reading some books back then because I had a lot of free time during the day because the students weren't there. The students came in at 4 till 8 p.m. every night and Saturday, Sunday. I was reading Jay Abraham, which I think some of your viewers would know about.
Yeah.
I think it was Jay. I remember reading one of his books and he said, can you guarantee the primary outcome that your clients want from you?
Yeah.
So I read that a few times and I thought, well, the primary outcome that the parents want in sending their teenagers to me is to get their teenagers a place in university. And that's achieved by getting a certain percentile band in the top, top 20, top 10% of the state. So then I sat down, and what I did, I actually guaranteed. There was a year where I guaranteed the results. So mathematics was plus 80%, physics, chemistry I think was plus 90. I can't remember the exact results. So the parents would walk in, and I didn't close all of them back then because there were other competitors around. But the very moment I actually guaranteed the results for the parents, and I said, I'll give you your full refund for the whole year's program.
Yeah.
So the moment I did that, the enrolments went from 40 to 400 in about 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I ran out of space.
Yeah, right.
I had to take another floor. 400 square metres per floor. So I took 2 floors, and I was a young guy at the time. And so one piece of information read in a book, which I then applied, and I do that now with all my clients. So if you can guarantee the outcome that your clients want from you, so in your case, sales marketing, right? I'm guessing leads, closing deals, whatever, X dollars, they spend X with you, they get X times Y, right?
Yeah.
If you can guarantee a certain percentage of growth based on your, investment or their investment in you, ROI, and you guarantee it. You say, well, if you spend $1 with me, I will generate $20 of leads for you. Otherwise, there'll be some sort of formula where you have to pay the price if you don't deliver. Yeah. Obviously, there are going to be caveats where they have to do the work as well.
Of course.
Right? The students in my coaching college had to complete the homework every week.
Yeah,
and show up to the lectures, right? If you don't complete the homework and show up to the lectures, guarantee giving you your money back is null and void.
Yeah.
Right. So if you really think about it, people come to you to get X, Y, Z results. If you can show them you got a track record and you can guarantee them that they will get those results, you can go from 5 clients. I mean, you can't do 55 clients one-on-one. I can't do 55 CEOs.
Of course.
And you can't get 55 CEOs in a room and run a course because they've all got big egos, right?
Yeah.
But you can go from 5 to 15 clients charging, like I used to, 18,000 a year to 200,000 a year per client.
Well, I think that's the other thing, and you've hit the nail on the head there, which is pricing, right? So when you've got the track record and you're willing to back yourself, like people don't understand the difference between adding a money back guarantee and not adding a money back guarantee might be able to double your rates, right? So we talk about getting to 5 million as fast as possible. The first thing you can do is work out how to lift the ceiling. And as business owners, most of the people that I speak to, they set their ceiling way down here. They're afraid, right? They're not either they're afraid to back themselves or they're afraid to put their prices up, but then they're perpetually complaining to me about how they don't get paid what they're worth, and it makes no sense. So, you know, your ceiling is way higher than typically you expect it to be, provided you can back it up with the results and you're willing to stick your neck out on the table. Because if they do the work and you do the work, hypothetically, we should all get there, barring train wreck.
And you know, you've got physical proof. I mean, if you can get one client, I'd say, you know, I went from 18,000 a year to 48,000. That was my next leap. So I went from 1,500 a month to 4,000. And then a few years ago, I went to about 6-7 years ago, I went to 160, which is 40 a quarter. And so to get one or two of those, and they're happy with your results, and you achieve what you want to achieve, well, your brain says, well, I'm no longer at that level. So it's like, it's like a jet airliner. You know, you get up to 40,000 feet. But you've got to start at ground, you know, you've got to start on the tarmac.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, we all learn how to walk in the first year of life, and we all learn how to talk in the second year of life or whatever. So the key, I think one of the keys, and in today's world, there are really no excuses. One of the keys is to be perpetually learning. You know, half an hour a day makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
If you read a topic, Brian Tracy, I caught up with Brian Tracy years ago here in Sydney. I sat next to him, we were having lunch together, and I remember him saying to me, he's one of the first guys that I first started reading when I was running my school as a young guy. Brian saying to me, if you study one topic and you read on it 30 minutes, I think it's 30 minutes a day, within 3 years within a year you're a national expert, and within 3 years you're an international expert. Now, if you read on that topic, you know, 2 hours a day, within less than a year you're an international expert.
Yeah.
So most people are not really focused, and you know, I'm not having a go at, you know, human beings. Obviously, we know, we're complex.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's true.
But I think being able to simplify things, and in this sort of game, it's about consistently learning and adding value. And like I said before, I think one of the best ways to do it is to find someone that's already climbed Mount Everest, and they come back down to base camp and take you up with them. A good story comes to mind, and whenever you're communicating with people, you give a fact and you give a story. Because people remember stories. It's it's the windscreen, you know, wiper effect. You know, fact, story. So it's a good way to sell as well.
It's very true.
Giving stories.
Very true.
There was a guy that I was referred to. I mentioned his full name. His first name was Nick, and a nice guy. He had 3 young kids, going bankrupt. He was running a health gym for pregnant ladies. And, you know, I said to him, you know, so he said, mate, I'm going bankrupt here. I'm not making any money. He was down south there. And I said, mate, it's a very tough market. Your clients have got a 7, 8, 9 month window to be clients of yours, then they're gone.
Yeah.
You know? So I said, mate, you know, you've got to shut it down. You've got to go get a job. You know, go and get a salary somewhere. So he shut it down, and then he said to me, how can I do what you do? I said, well, you can do it, but I said, you know, you're in your mid-40s, you've got no experience, you just send a business into the ground. Mate, you know, it's a long path. He said, I'll pay you to teach me for a year what you do. So I looked at this guy, he was serious. So I took Nick under my wing, and in the space of a year, he was clearing, I think, $400,000 or $500,000 a year.
Wow.
And I didn't teach him everything, like, you know, a year's not long enough, but I taught him the basic fundamentals of how to find, you know, close, and run a 12-month mentoring program.
Yeah, right.
Now, one of my cousins, she lives in Adelaide, and a couple of years ago, she called me on the phone and she said, "You wouldn't believe what happened today." I said, "Try me, you know." She said, "Oh, there was a guy called Nick who was running a business seminar here in Adelaide with 800 people, and in the first 2 minutes of his speech, he mentioned your name." So I said, "It's a small world, you know."
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, I've got guys that I've worked with who are ahead of me, who sort of trailblazed. I've got, you know, the USA is the place to be. You know, there's some great people that come out of the US. The US, as you know, they're just really open to business and entrepreneurship. You know, they lead the way. You know, and you know, some of the other nations aren't bad, but I always turn to the US, and there's a lot of good stuff coming out of there, as would be the case with your stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of our client base is even in the US.
Yeah, correct. And I'm looking to get a few there, you know, starting the next few months. So it'd be good to go over. So find someone who's already done what you want to do.
Yeah.
Number one, quickest way to, because we'll compress time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all about, if you've got to pay $100,000 to compress 5 years of your life to get the 5 clients, I mean, you know, you work with me, I got you started, pointed you in the right direction, right? And now you've got a thriving business. So that's the first thing. The second thing is hang around people that sort of do what you do, or hang around people that, you know, you want to sit down and see how their mind ticks. You want to sit down and see how they structure their life, how they structure their finances, how they structure their training schedules, because success leaves clues.
Yep.
And there's a lot out there these days, and you don't need to have 50 people you're following. 2, 3 is enough.
Yeah.
And you just need one advisor or one consultant or one mentor for 6 months a year, and if they're genuine about helping you, which the good guys are, change your whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the problem with entrepreneurship nowadays, and this is a problem with people in my generation, right? The younger crop that are trying to build businesses, is most people are impatient. So they don't want to spend the time today to learn everything they need to do. They don't want to work as hard doing that than they do, you know, perhaps being on social media and doing the flashing things that may not always lead to revenue.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the biggest keys of success that I've always felt as I've grown my businesses, and there have been a few over time, is number one, be open to learning.
100%.
Number two, be open to being wrong, right?
100%.
So you can course adjust.
Yeah.
But number three, understand that there's a delayed gratification effect that's
100%.
going to kick in when you're learning. You're not going to get everything you need to get immediately, because if you did, we'd all be doing it. None of us would be going back to work.
And if it was easy, you would, you know, if the New York Jets won every week.
Don't talk about the New York Jets.
John's a New York Jets fan.
Don't talk about the New York Jets. I'm going to cancel this
All right,
podcast.
If my team won every week, after a while you just stop
get
following,
over it.
right?
You get bored of winning.
You know, if you read a book and, you know, every chapter said, you know, life's great. Next chapter, life's great. Next, you know, like after a while you put the book down.
Yeah.
All right. So the hardest thing for human beings to do, more so today, and I work with grown men and women, and I think the ladies are more focused than the men. I must admit, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a great thing. But I think human beings these days find it very hard to be present.
Yeah.
They're always thinking about,
I agree.
you know, what's happening tomorrow. I've got to pay this bill, or I've got to do this thing tomorrow, or, you know, whatever. And they're always reflecting on all the stuff that went wrong in the past. And you know, like your thoughts, and being able, like I'm here now with you.
Yeah.
I don't think about anything else.
Yeah.
When I go fly fishing in New Zealand, and it's one of my passions, I do my best thinking when I'm in New Zealand, when I'm on a river catching brown trout, because there's no distractions. You're in nature, and I don't know whether your dad's got a boat. He goes fishing.
Of course.
So when you're fishing, you're present. There's no, you know, I've got to do this tomorrow when I get back to Sydney. There's none of that.
Yeah.
So if you can take that and bring it into your life, and especially in the advisory game where there's so many moving parts, and just put each one in place, you can transform your business 6 months.
Yeah.
You get a good mentor, right? You get a good sales marketing guy, shows you the ropes. You can transform your whole life and your family's life. 6 months, a year, 2 years. It just depends on how big the task is, and and how big the outcome is, the goal and the objective. But I've seen miracles occur in a very short period of time, simply because people have just,
set aside the distractions.
Yeah. And I tell a lot of my clients when I first meet them. So this is what happens with most of my clients. A lot of you would be familiar with this. I walk in and I have a gap analysis. I find out as many things as I can about the potential client. And one thing I'll find out is they're doing 36 things.
Yeah.
They're running 12 businesses, dating 7 women or dating 7 guys, right? 26 million investments, no track, nothing. So I tell them, the reason why the Grand Canyon is so grand, the Grand Canyon, is because the rivers that etched it out, they didn't go wide and shallow. They went narrow and deep.
Yeah.
So one of the keys to succeeding is to be ultra focused. And if you're going to be a business consultant, you're going to be a mentor, just go narrow and deep.
Yeah.
Cut out all the distractions from a business career perspective, and just say to yourself, I'm going to be a totally different person in a year's time. I'm going to bring so much more value to the table, and just carve out a path where that occurs. Look at what you've done in the space of a decade.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're learning.
Of course.
You're learning all the time.
And we're still making mistakes, and we're still fixing mistakes, and then we're learning. And I think that's the thing that, I can tell you, not to plug you, but the one thing I learned from you was, when I met you, I didn't read, right? I'd read Harry Potter. That was about the extent of it, I'll be honest, right?
I haven't read Harry Potter.
Well, you should read Harry Potter. Some good lessons in Harry Potter. But outside of Harry Potter, I hadn't read another book. I had never picked up a business book in my life, and here I was thinking I was going to hit the ground running and run a business, which was complete bullshit. It's just not the way it works.
No.
And so, you've got to be open to learning, and then you've got to be ultra focused. I went through a period of my life when I decided, okay, I'm all in on this, where I had to say to friends, I'm going to be spending less time with you. Where I had to look at my hobbies and say, I enjoy doing this, but there's going to be a dedicated time maybe in my life to do that. That's not today. I'm going to get focused. I'm going to go deep. I'm going to make this my all. And I think that there are a lot of business owners out there that are kind of, and I know this is going to piss people off when they hear me say it, but they approach this in a really half-assed way, and then they ask themselves why they haven't cracked a certain revenue milestone that they're expecting to crack. And it's just, you're not free of distractions. And how can you do your best work when you're constantly being pulled in 7 different directions?
Cannot.
It's not going to happen,
Yeah.
right? You've got to be regimented, you've got to be committed, but you've got to be distraction free, because everything else is just noise, and all noise does is drown out the stuff that you should be working on.
And there's competition. So if you're doing 7 things and I'm doing one of those 7 things, you can't outcompete me.
Yeah,
Because I'm fully focused on one area. So I've gone narrow and deep, you've gone shallow and wide, right? And you've got so many distractions. Monday to Saturday for me is basically, daytimes working on my business, and in the evenings. Sunday, there's no plans on Sunday.
Yeah.
So if Sunday's always open, and I get away every 3 months, 3-4 months, I go fishing somewhere around the world, fly fishing. But I know that when I'm in that zone, not only that, but the work that we're in, people are depending on you. People bring their whole lives to you.
Of course.
People bring their whole company to you. So it's not a light-hearted profession. That, if you don't advise correctly, depending on what level you're at, you could stuff up a whole company. You can stuff up 100 people's lives, right? So, there's a lot of weight to what we do.
Yeah.
And we have to have fun in life, because we're only here for a short time. But, have a bit of fun. But our game is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got to be somewhat serious, because it gets, because, the person on the other side, perceives you as being the CEO, or just another middle of the road advisor, which I was once.
Of course.
Right? So there's informal training and there's formal training. Now, the informal training is far more important than the tertiary training. So I've got a science degree, chemistry, physics. I've got a Master of Business from the Universities of Sydney and New South. Great to do them, but at the end of the day, nothing beats rubber on the road, front line, getting it done, going to war, so to speak,
Yeah.
and working with live human beings and getting feedback as to, something's working and something isn't. And something, like you said, something is not working, you've got to go out and find the solution to that, or recommend someone to come in to help them in that specific area. So at the moment, I've just enrolled in a Six Sigma operations program, which runs for a few months, part-time. And it's simply for that, it's, for actually streamlining the operations of a company. I don't have to go learn that, but of course we talk about operations, so why not learn something about operations, something more than what I already know, and bring that value to the table?
I think the most interesting observation I made there is just that you've gone back to learn more, right? And it would be easy for someone in your position to say, I'm in my mid-50s, I'm an accomplished person, I've done a lot of stuff, I've made a good amount of money, I don't need to do anything extra. Very easy for people to do that. People get complacent really, really quickly. And I see this again with the growth of a business, right? People get to a point where they're making enough money that they're comfortable and they start to take their foot off the pedal. They think, I've done the hard work and the rest is just going to work itself out over time. And it doesn't work like that. You've got to be committed to growing, learning, moving, making mistakes, earning your spot.
Yeah, you're right.
And there you are. You are. You could say, fuck it, I don't want to do any more learning, but you haven't.
So this is what you've got to be committed to. I've sort of had this breakthrough the last few years. When you're young, when I had my first business and I started mentoring around the world, Europe, Middle East, Australia, I've just made 50,000, I'm going to go and buy that car. Or I made 20 grand, I'm going to go and buy those 3 fishing rods and go for a trip and party hard, Greek islands, whatever, right? But as you get a bit older, you sort of realise, well, it's probably more to it than that. So if you're in business, you have a license to serve.
Yeah.
Right. So your number one value is, how do I make an impact? Whether you're selling this bottle of water or whether you're selling these apples, right? The philosophy of the organisation or of the individual, of the CEOs should be, and the team should be, how do we get to serve more people and make a greater impact?
Yeah.
And if you have that philosophy, right, number one, you keep growing because you want to continuously serve more and more and better and better. And number two, the money takes care of itself. Like, you just wake up in the morning and say, oh yeah, I just had a deposit of 6 figures into my account today. And it's like second nature. Your accounts department gives you a summary every quarter. But the real joy comes from making a difference. Tony Robbins, and I'm pretty sure Tony got it from somewhere. I remember years ago when I did some work with him, one of his seminars, one of his multi-day events. He said there are 6 human needs: certainty, uncertainty, significance, love, growth, and contribution. And the last two, growth and contribution, are the only 2 of the 6 that give you meaning in life. Yeah. Everyone finds a way to fulfill the first 4. Right? Yeah. But the last 2, growth and contribution, is what juices up your life. So the discussions I have with all of my clients is, why should your clients come to you, and what difference are you making with them? And once we clarify that, which is the strategic direction of the business and what they stand for, so once we do that in my 15S model, so that's the first thing in my 15S coaching model, so the strategic direction, the sales structure, staff, systems, right, all that sort of stuff. Once we work out the very first step of a business and their heart's in it to serve, everything sort of becomes much easier after that, because you're thinking, okay, this person's walked through my door today, how can I serve them and get them to come back and get them to bring their friends? Yeah. Because then you've got a business. Yeah? Yeah, absolutely. So I think thinking about the dollars, you're right, people get to a certain level, my mortgage is paid off, I can go on a holiday, kids are at school, why should I grow anymore? But if you stagnate, you actually start going backwards. So growth, growth and contribution are key. And so I think the more people you serve, the greater the wealth. Yep. The greater the cause, the greater the wealth. So just find a way to perpetually serve more people with greater value. I think that's, I don't want to summarise life too easily, but I think, You know, we come
I hear
from, you know, our parents come from a Greek culture.
Yeah.
And the ancient Greeks spoke about this.
Yeah.
You're only here for a short time. You know, we're here for 80 revolutions around the sun. If you live to 80, the Earth's gone around the sun 80 times. That's what you've done.
Yeah.
On this little rock in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
30 quintillion galaxies in our universe, 30 plus 15 zeros. And we only come down for 80 years, 90, 80, 70 years. So you might as well do something with it and leave it a better place when you're gone. Sure, have a great time.
Yeah.
But how can you find a way to serve?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? When you know what your purpose is, and you know how you want to be out there, and you know how you want to serve, you will find that clients will flock to you. You know, I don't want to get all spiritually and university, but here's the reality. I mean, I've always found this. Whenever we've launched something new, and we've really felt like there was something we wanted to do, an initiative we wanted to pull in the business, clients have come our way. You know? And it happens because you end up having that gravitas, but because more so when you commit to achieving something grand and you've got that scale to measure yourself against, you will innately find ways to do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's 4 stages of human evolution. There's the athlete stage. When you're young, it's the athlete. Look at me, ego. Aren't I great? I can run 100 meters in, 11 seconds, whatever, right? And then hopefully you evolve from the athlete stage to the hunter stage, which means I've got to get out of this big bad world. I've got to hunt for myself, put a roof over my head, hunt for my family. You know, the parents have to raise some kids. That's the hunter stage. Now, most people will stop at those 2 stages. Some people never leave the athlete stage.
Yeah.
Some people have an ego till the end of their lives, right? And, I know a few people like that, right? They're 60. Yeah, that's okay. But athlete, hunter. There's 2 more stages. Then you've got the statesman or the stateswoman stage, which is how do I make a difference in a community somewhere, And that's a very small percentage of people. But there are people who have more than enough, and then they move to the stage of, all right, I'm in the back half of my life. I want to make an impact somewhere. And then the final stage is a spiritual master, where you realise we're all the same. We're just stardust. All the atoms on the earth have come from an exploded star. From a nuclear fusion explosion. When a star explodes, hydrogen atoms become helium, which is what our sun puts out the energy of that, and then those hydrogens and heliums basically coalesce to produce, carbon and silicon and potassium and gold and all that, right? So at the end of the day, everything you see around you is made of the same substance. Now there's a spirit within us, of course, but we're just stardust at the end of the day. This physical stuff, it's going to disappear one day, right?
Yeah.
So if you walk around with that mindfulness of, I'm here for a short time, everything is interconnected, it's all frequency. I'm going back to my nuclear physics stuff. At the end of the day, it's all frequency. And basically, how do you attract these clients? Because you're putting out a different frequency.
Yeah.
If the frequency you're putting out is let me serve and I'm relaxed, present, and I keep learning, the challenge you're going to have is how you're going to serve these people. Really. If you're genuine about, having people's backs and making an impact, and in our game, it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
And as business advisors, mentors, coaches, all that stuff, once you get that, and you can impart that to your clients as well, everything changes. I don't think life's that difficult. Just have fun and overcome the challenges. There's going to be challenges.
Has to be.
Stay present, make a difference somewhere. Find a way to make a difference. Now, what do I do when I start with a new client? Speaking about that, I'll tell the client, look, you made $10 million profit last year. Picking a nice round number, right? And I'll go, well, why'd you bring me in for? I want to serve more people. Great answer. That's the answer I want to hear. If I hear, I'm going to make another 10 million because I want to buy a Ferrari, my 4th Ferrari, I'm not sure I want to work with you. So what I tell my clients is not only do I want you to get more clients to serve within your product service range,
yeah,
but I also tell them that if you're going to work with me, you've got to take 5-10% of your net profit at the end of the financial year, and I want you and your company to go and make a difference to a community which is not directly related to your business.
Yeah.
So I've got one client, he's actually a very good friend of mine, a Vietnamese gentleman, and he came out here as a refugee on a junket, from Vietnam. He's a multi. He runs childcare centres. Every year he goes back to, I think it's Laos. He's from Vietnam, but he goes back to Laos and he brings water to the villages. So he takes a small percentage of what he makes, 5, 10, 20%. That's his business. And he's, this year we brought water to 27 villages. And he's had an impact. And here's the good news is that every time he does that, for some reason, the universe gives him more clients to serve, and there's more money to go back and, pour into, excuse the pun, pour into the water projects in Laos. So it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So if you're self-centered and all you think about it, what's in it for me, and I'm just going to get this client and I'm going to use him or her for 6 months and they'll pay me and I'll do the bare minimum, you should go and do something else.
Yeah.
And that's with anything in life. If your heart's not in it,
I agree.
it becomes abrasive. There's a lot of friction in life,
Yeah, I totally agree. And if we're going to bring this back now, let's bring this back to the person who wants to build that $5 million worth of revenue.
Yeah.
So you've never done it before.
Yeah.
You've got someone in front of you who knows they want to get there. Maybe they've just started their business, or maybe they've plateaued and they've said, you know what, I've made $1 million. I don't know how to get to 5, or I've made $500,000. I don't know how to get to 5.
They've never done it before?
They've never made to $5 million before.
Okay.
And that's where they want to get to.
Okay, so what I would do, I'd just go and find someone who's running a business. Say, look, I'm starting out. I'd love to mentor you. And just start out like I did, $1,500 a month.
Yep.
Which for most businesses, $18,000 a year or $24,000 a year, it's a no-brainer. And just pour it on. So, that person is giving you an opportunity. Take what you already know and add to it. So continuously develop and bring value to the table. And you can bring a lot of value to the table if someone's paying you $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's business advisors out there who are charging less than $2,000 a month. Double it, triple it, because you're starting off at a very, very low base.
Yeah. True.
Do that for a few people. So they're your training wheels, and then take part of that income and go and find someone who's at 5 million.
Yeah.
Or who's at 2 million, right? You might think, well, someone who's making 5 million, they're not going to work with me. What I get the young guys in my foundation to do, once they decide what business they want to start up in, I get them to write some handwritten letters to the top business CEOs who are already leading that field, asking them to take them out to, asking the CEOs if they can take them out to, for a lunch or a dinner. And 9 times out of 10, those guys at the top will say, yeah, sure, he's a young kid, 20-year-old kid.
Why not?
He's got some chops to ask me out. And, some of these guys stick and they work with this kid. They actually employ them sometimes, or they give them a light management role. And the next thing you know, this kid in 5 years has learned what, the average 50-year-old learns. By the age of 25, they've got all this information, right? So, quickest way, start off at the lower base because you don't have the wisdom or the experience, I'm guessing, and then take part of that income. Don't buy the latest car, right?
Yeah.
And go and get someone who's at 1 million, who's at 2, who's at 5, because you can spend an hour a month with that person, and they will tell you 5 things every time. And the first thing that an advisor does, John, is he or she tells you what pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, it's true.
So the most important thing, the first thing an advisor does is, this is what not to do, right? Charlie Munger, who passed away at the age of 99, Warren Buffett's partner.
Yeah.
They asked him, success in life, and he said, well, just avoid all the dumb stuff, which people do, right? And he said, you can avoid all the dumb stuff. Obviously, he was speaking about investments, but if you can avoid all the dumb stuff that people do, you've got an extremely good chance of succeeding in life.
True.
So the first thing that a good advisor does, a good confidant, consigliere for all our Italian clients, they tell you what not to do. They show you where the potholes are.
Yeah.
Yeah?
True.
Go away, come back when you're ready, because I don't think writing jingles is going to work for you. So the first conversation you and I had was, go away, come back. Don't do that. Your heart wasn't in it. So you went away.
That's right.
I could have said to you, okay, let's sit down and see how you can do 20 jingles. All right?
Yeah.
Right. Find someone who's made the mistakes and can do what? Compress time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much money you pay. If someone can compress decades for you, it's worth it.
Yep.
Because they've done all the hard yards. And we all stand on the shoulders of giants anyway. I haven't invented anything in my consulting framework. Yes, I've put it together myself and it's unique to itself, but I've had to read and, spend decades putting it all, but I've picked it up from various sources.
Yep.
Sitting next to some guys, So it's not difficult because most people, like I said, they're not present and they're not continuously learning / adding value.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you.
Especially in today's world, it's all social media, clickbait. Everyone's walking around like this.
True.
People are not looking where they're going.
True. So here's what I'm hearing from you. Number one, you got to just go out and sign your first couple of clients.
Just do it.
With your training wheels on.
You're going to be dead in 60, 70, 50 years anyway. Just dive in.
Just dive in.
Yep.
See what happens. Get your training wheels off, right? The second thing is, don't forget that when you start to make some money, to reinvest that money into your own growth, your own learning. So if you can't afford to do that, I actually like Dan's idea. Write some letters. Like, I look, not to bring up an NFL example, but I often talk about Josh Allen, right? He's the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. And he was a 0-star recruit for college. What that means, he didn't have a star. Like, there's usually a star rating, and 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. He didn't even get a star. So he was on the radar of no colleges. He wrote a letter to every single college in America and pursued it until a college gave him an opportunity. He's now 1 game away from the Super Bowl this year. He's MVP candidate. But that is emblematic of the work that he did back then, right? Because he pursued it. So if you haven't got the money, contact people, write the letters, drop the line on social media, knock on the door of the office if you can and say, I'd love to.
The big people up top, they know what it's like to start from the bottom.
Yep.
And if you just ask, they are willing to help. Believe me. You pick someone. Just pick a sporting star. Pick, if you're in basketball or NFL or something, you want to learn. I'm sure, if you're coming up through college and you wanted to be a quarterback, I don't know, if you wrote a letter to Tom Brady, I reckon you might get a call or maybe a face-to-face with Tom. I don't know. But I would do that. I get a lot of my clients like that. So I'll give you a perfect story. We all know Mont Blanc, right? So I've got some Mont Blanc pens here with me. Anyway, a few years ago, about 3-4 years ago, I'm walking through the city here, walked into a Mont Blanc store. It was a hot day. I had a suit on, finished with a client. And I wanted some refills for my fountain pen, for my rollerball. And there's nice Hong Kong Asian girls, like ladies, great attitude. I said, we give you a Mont Blanc water today, free of charge. I said, oh, that's great, it's hot, And they didn't charge me for the refill. They had a look online. I've been a loyal customer. So they, gave me another bottle of water. Merry Christmas. I said, oh, right, that's great. So I left, went home, got my letterhead, and I got the name of their CEO, who was based in Melbourne. And I wrote him a letter. I said, dear Leon, had this great service. What can I say? It's a reflectance of how you run your business, based on how your staff treated me today. I get a phone call a couple of days later. He says, I'm coming down to Sydney, let's meet. And he became a client.
Yeah, right? There you go.
So people don't get handwritten letters anymore. Whenever I meet someone for the first time, a potential client, I will go back and write them a handwritten letter and mail it to them, right? You'd be surprised. I get a call back saying, I can't wait to see you next week for our discovery session.
Yeah.
Because I've never had a letter before.
There you go.
Small
There's a
things.
tactic on its own. There's a tactic on its own.
1,000 things you can do.
Absolutely. So we get our training wheels off by closing clients. Just get the first couple, even if the price isn't great. You got to get yourself out there. The second thing is you want to surround yourself with the right people. If you can't afford it, guess what? Try and contact people who have done it before and see how far you get. Just make the contact. If you can afford it, do both that and potentially pay for some help, pay for some learning. Don't be afraid to continue learning. But then at some point, and I think the third thing is one of the first things we spoke about today, is you're starting to acquire knowledge. Now it's time to back yourself up a little bit. You've taken your training wheels off, lift your prices, start to guarantee your work. Because ideally by that point, you know exactly what you're doing,
You can
right?
find out what they want.
Find out what they
and you
want.
guarantee it.
And you might have to close clients to work that out, by the way.
No, yeah, it's basically a strategic direction exercise. So when I start with clients, the first 3 months we work out the actual true identity of the company, and that falls out of that.
Yeah.
Who your client is, why should they come to you? The very first question I ask anyone in business: why should I come? Why should I get my water from you?
Yeah.
It's 1,000 water companies.
Yeah.
And most people go, oh, quality service. And go, yeah, everyone gives me the same answer.
Yeah.
Right? What's so different about your water, and how can you guarantee that I get this purity, if purity is a difference, every single time? And you've got to back yourself. Because you know what happens when you back yourself? Your standards rise and the value you bring rises.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Someone says to you, you better walk from here to Perth, was it 2,000 kilometres? 2,000 miles? You better walk from here to Perth in a month, or I'm taking your 2 daughters, right? That's a guarantee. You're going to walk it.
Of course.
You probably walk it back,
Probably.
right?
Right.
So if you add enough leverage on yourself, you know, if you promise something, you've got to rise up to it. And your clients are very sensitive to what you say and what you deliver.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
You know, if you miss out even the smallest detail, to them it might be important.
Yeah.
So one of the other things to being a great advisor is to be present and to really take good notes and stay in close communication with your client and stay tight with what they want. And the smallest request from them, you have to basically act quickly on it, because they're all different.
Mm-hmm.
And they all come from different backgrounds, and they all got different experiences, different businesses. There are different cycles of the business. So become a good listener and follow up. If you really, because at the end of the day, what keeps us humans together is trust.
True.
If you can keep your promises with the people around you and with your clients, trust will open up so many doors for you that you can't find and you can't walk through.
Yeah.
So trust is the glue that holds it all together, and accountability and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take our training wheels off with our clients, we surround ourselves with the right people, and we're committed to learning. Then we start to sign some real clients. We're making real money, up our fees, back ourselves, right? Really back ourselves to allow us leverage to actually up our fees. That's going to lift the revenue of the business. I think the next one, if I can interject, is don't spend money on stupid shit. And as soon as you got the money, you mentioned this earlier, you don't buy the flashy car.
No.
You don't go and upgrade the house, right? You spend the money on, I believe, one of 2 things. And ideally, you're spending money on both. Number 1, you pour money into the growth of the business. So that's sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Number 2, you spend money to add time back to your pocket so that you can deploy yourself properly in the business. Because how many business owners, and this is a plateau, most of them reach at around $500,000. They're spending time on 10-minute tasks, right? Even just the value of outsourcing your emails, right? And having someone else organize them for you, or doing your admin, doing your books, right? Things that as business owners, when we get to a certain level, become extracurricular work, but they wind up eating time in our regular day, right? So I'm recording this podcast, right? Guess what? The 10-minute task that happens after this is the chopping of the videos, the synchronization of the audio, the packaging it up, and the posting on social media. I'm not going to do any of that. Now, there's probably a point in time where I thought to myself, listen, I'll do it. I've got the skills to do it. I can do it myself. But all I'm really going to do is distract myself from doing what? The most impactful thing, which is probably doing more of this, right? Because then if it banks up, I'm never going to get it done. Or I'm going to get it done at the expense of client work, which brings in most of the money, sales work, which brings in new money, or this type of work, which is good for the marketing. You know, so it's not just focus, it's also then deploying the money that you're making now intelligently, which I got to be honest, most business people are not.
Yeah, so if you take three equal circles and you basically intersect them all three like an Olympic sort of ring, what you want to do is find something that you get paid well for, something that you're really good at, and something you enjoy. And the center of those three intersections is where you should be spending the most of your time. So I had a chat this morning with this gentleman, and I said, if you were in prison, but they let you out 1 hour a day, so a limousine drove up to your office, came upstairs 10 a.m, and you went back down at 11 a.m, back to prison, and you had 1 hour a day, right, to work on your business, what would you do in that 1 hour? And he was crystal. He said, well, I'll be doing that. I'll be leading my sales team, right? He's in the sales business, property sales. So I said to him, show me your diary. And he showed me his diary, and I said, well, show me where you're working on your sales team. And it was about half an hour a week.
There you go.
So I said, all these other tasks are secondary tasks.
Yeah. As
humans, the subconscious takes over, and we tend to, fall into low value activities. And you've got to be organised. You've got to know. You've got to live with your values. And the CEOs only have 6-7 things that I get them to focus on most of the time. Number one is thinking time. Right? Mm-hmm. So I tell them, show me your diary, show me where your slab, where you've put out time to think on the business. And there hardly is any.
Yeah.
Right? Number two is allocation of resources. So as the head of a business, how do I allocate time, my people, my finances, our energy? Which clients are we going to focus on? So allocation of resources. The third thing that I get them to do, which most of these guys have never done before, I tell them, what's the elephant in the room? They go, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, for this quarter, what are the 3, 4, 5, 6 objectives that you need, that have been sitting in your office, sitting in this company? It's a big dinosaur sitting in your company. It's there. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And so what's the number one obstacle that you need to remove, you and your team need to put to bed or progress forward for this quarter?
Yeah.
So we list them. And at the end of every quarter, when we have our board of directors meetings, I actually hold them, to accountability, hold them accountable as to, well, did you move those 6 objectives, right?
Yeah.
So thinking time, allocation of resources, elephant in the room, if you're a Chinese, client, dragon in the room, right? Measuring the KPIs, so being ahead of the key drivers.
Yeah. Number
5, what's the culture you're trying to build? And obviously, number 6 is strategy. Are we going from A to B?
Yeah.
So this year you want to go from A to B. In 3 years you want to go from A to B to C. Are we on track?
Yeah.
They are non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And I get these people who are chief executive officers who are supposed to make the chief decision, because an executive is a person who makes decisions.
Yeah.
From the French word, right? So I get these people who call themselves CEOs to finally start doing stuff that CEOs are meant to do, which they've never done before.
Yeah.
It's might as well be in a different galaxy.
Yeah.
And everything changes, right? So as a business advisor, consultant, there's probably 3 or 4 things that you should be doing. Number 1, you've got to be in front of clients. Now, whether it's be by Zoom, by over the airwaves, whether it be face-to-face, right? You only actually get paid, I think, most of the time when you're in front of a client. Obviously, you can do remedial work and strategic work outside normal hours, which I do. But for most of us, we're getting paid actually mentoring, coaching, advising, leading, right? The second task, I think, that, come back to what we've been speaking about today, is research, learning. Right? So building your skills. So if you're not in front of a client, you should be building your skills.
Yeah.
The third thing is you probably should be writing or doing this sort of stuff, which is a verbal way of talking, writing. Right? So you should be, having some presence where people can go to your thought, to your thought leadership.
Yeah.
And number 4, of course, is networking, sales. The clients need to see me.
Yeah.
I could send a representative, but they go, nah, I don't want to work with Dan. I actually want to have the final sign-off with Dan. And because my agreements are in six figures these days, I can't do it over the phone, and I can't do it with an e-sign document via an email. You actually have to do it face to face or over Zoom. You know what I mean? So it's got to. So you know, if you're in the consulting business, you've got to become very good at selling.
True.
And there's a lot of steps involved to get, you know, high-paying clients to come to you, because these people, because they're high-paying, they're pretty intelligent people.
Yeah.
You know, they have awareness.
True.
So they're the four things. Do your stuff in front of clients, research, learn, write, you know, put your materials out there, sales, and then take time off.
Yeah.
Because as you know, it's mentally.
Of course.
Like sometimes I do 3 clients in a day, 3 hours each. And at the end of that 9 hours, it's like I've run a marathon. You know what I mean?
It's true.
So you've got to get away. You've got to go to the beach.
Yep.
Otherwise, it defeats the purpose.
Yeah, very, very true.
But it's a very rewarding game, because you get the opportunity to impact people. If I'm working with a company with 200 staff, I'm impacting 200 people indirectly, but I'm impacting. And if they got families and wages and things to do, you're impacting 1,000 people.
Yep.
You know?
Very true.
So you've got to be on.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a casual thing.
Absolutely. And that's probably the best place for us to end. So that's my friend Dan Floros, my mentor Dan Floros, the CEO. I want you to plug Adelphia really quickly, because that was life-changing for me, and I think that anyone who can, you know, spend their time either doing something similar or could maybe potentially contribute.
So we're just in the process of redoing both my website and Adelphia. Adelphia is just a holding page. Repositioning myself for 2025. So when I sold my school, I put 4,500 young people into university. That for me wasn't work. This isn't work for me either. But I really enjoyed working with young people.
Yeah.
And impacting their lives. And just one day I just thought, you know, it'd be great to work with young people again. How old were you when I started working with you?
Well, when did we meet?
20?
When did we meet? 2010, right?
2010.
So I was 19.
You were 19, there you go.
19.
So the Adelphia Foundation basically is developing, you know, future leaders, primarily business. You know, they're starting up their own businesses. A lot of these guys have finished university and they've got no direction. It can be a bit of a challenge for young men these days in this world too, you know, where a lot of the attention has gone to, you know, ladies, which is cool. You know, they were neglected all those years, but some of the guys are left behind. So I started a group formally beginning of last year, and we meet on the second Saturday of every month, and there's 12 guys to a group, and basically I pair them up and they go out and start businesses, and I teach all this stuff to them. I don't charge them anything. I've got a board now. We're forming our third group of guys, and like I said before, I'm going to start one for the ladies as well, because I think some of the girls are fantastic in starting, you know, businesses and leadership positions. And I'm looking to take it, you know, to different parts of the world, finding some good people to also do what I do. And there's nothing better than having an impact on young people's lives, especially if they're coming from a lower socioeconomic positioning, you know, background, or they come from broken families. I've got, you know, people in there, they haven't seen their father or their mother for 40 years, or they're orphans or whatever. So, and it comes back tenfold. I don't expect it to, but you give a little, and it, you know what, keeps me alive.
Yep.
Having these young people in my life and making a difference, it actually is going to probably add a few more years to my life, you know.
That'd be good.
That'd be good.
That'd be good.
So you get more of me, you know.
Yeah. Well, before we finish, I've just got one more thing to ask you.
Yeah.
And it's a favour.
Yeah,
I need this to happen on camera.
Oh no, this will be good.
This will be good. Do me your best.
How many favours have you asked me in the last 15 years?
Well, I haven't asked any in the last year except for this podcast, so I think I'm working towards one. I need your best Robert De Niro impression.
You're good, you're good.
Good way to finish.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Good way to finish. Dan, thanks so much for hanging out with me.
Yeah, good. Thanks for the invite, John. And it's good to see how far you have come.
Appreciate that.
Since that that day when I slammed the door in your face.
Well, I'm not writing jingles anymore. I'll put it
You're
that
not
way.
writing jingles anymore. Pleasure
All right.
to be here.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, John.